My parents didn't want me at my mother's birthday because I didn't look good enough compared to them. Turns out I secretly paid for their entire life, and now their power, water, and internet are shut off and they're being evicted. I am 32 years old, living in suburban Atlanta, and I guess you could say I've made it. Not in the way most people think about success, though. See, I'm Mark, and for the past 8 years, I've been running a fintech company that specializes in green energy investments. We're talking serious money here, the kind that would make your average Wall Street guy jealous. But here's the kicker. My own family thinks I'm basically a glorified data entry clerk. Let me paint you a picture of my lovely family dynamics. There's my dad, James, who still thinks the internet is just for looking at cat videos and checking the weather. My mom, Linda, bless her heart, who genuinely believes that anyone who works on a computer for a living is automatically unsuccessful. And then there's my sister, Sarah, who's been the golden child since she could walk. Sarah's 30 now, bouncing between retail jobs and whatever boyfriend can tolerate her drama for more than 6 months. The last real conversation I had with any of them was about 3 years ago at a family barbecue. Dad spent 20 minutes explaining to me how real men work with their hands, not keyboards. Mom kept asking when I was going to get a real job with benefits, completely ignoring the fact that I own the company and literally provide benefits to 47 employees. Sarah just rolled her eyes every time I tried to contribute to any conversation. That barbecue was the breaking point for me. I remember driving home afterward, thinking about how exhausting it was to constantly defend my choices to people who had zero interest in understanding them. So I made a decision that probably sounds familiar to a lot of you. I went low contact. Not no contact, because let's be honest, cutting off family completely feels like nuclear option territory, but definitely minimal engagement. Here's where things get interesting, though, and this is the part that still keeps me up at night sometimes. Despite feeling completely unappreciated and misunderstood, I couldn't quite shake this need to prove myself to them. You know that feeling, right? Where logic tells you walk away, but some deep part of your brain is still that 5-year-old kid desperately wanting mommy and daddy's approval. So what did my brilliant 30-something self decide to do? I started secretly paying their bills. Not just helping out here and there. I'm talking about taking over their entire mortgage and utilities. It started small, actually. Mom called me one day, probably 2 weeks after the barbecue incident, complaining about how complicated all these online payment systems were getting. She said it would be so much easier if someone else just handled it, someone who understood all this computer stuff. Looking back, I can see the manipulation clear as day. But at the time, I thought I was being helpful. I thought I was proving how successful I really was, even if they didn't know it. Plus, 50 grand over 5 years wasn't exactly breaking the bank for me. My company had just closed a major deal with 3 solar farms in Texas, and money was flowing pretty freely. The setup was actually pretty simple. I had their mortgage company transfer the account to my name as the payer, kept their names on the deed, obviously. Same thing with the electric, water, gas, internet, even their cell phone plan. Every month, like clockwork, about $2,000 would automatically leave my account to keep their comfortable suburban lifestyle running. And they never questioned it. Not once. Dad would occasionally mention how lucky they were that the mortgage rate stayed low, or Mom would comment on how the electric company must be giving them some kind of senior discount. They never bothered to actually look at the statements, never wondered why their bank account wasn't getting drained by these major expenses. Meanwhile, I'm living my actual life, building a business, traveling for work, even dating seriously for a while. I bought a house about 30 minutes from them, close enough to help if there was an emergency, far enough away to maintain my sanity. Nice place, too, for bedrooms, finished basement, 2-car garage. The kind of house that should have been a dead giveaway that I wasn't struggling financially. But here's the thing about willful ignorance. People see exactly what they want to see. When I invited them over for a housewarming, Dad assumed I was renting. When I mentioned business trips to California or New York, Mom figured my company was just sending their computer guy to fix something. When I showed up to family events in decent clothes and a reliable car, they somehow convinced themselves I was living beyond my means. The really twisted part is that I started enjoying the secret. There was something almost addictive about knowing I was single-handedly keeping their world running while they continued to treat me like the family disappointment. It felt like I was playing some kind of long game, building up to this moment when I'd finally reveal the truth and watch their faces change. I had this whole fantasy worked out in my head. Maybe at Christmas dinner, I'd casually mention that I owned a mortgage. Or perhaps during one of Dad's lectures about financial responsibility, I'd pull out my phone and show him the payment history. I imagined Mom finally understanding that her son wasn't just successful, but successful enough to quietly support an entire second household without breaking a sweat. 5 years of this. 5 years of automatic payments. 5 years of family gatherings where I sat quietly while they made jokes about my career. 5 years of watching Sarah get praised for keeping a retail job for more than 8 months while I was building something that actually mattered. 5 years of thinking that eventually, somehow, they'd figure out and everything would change. But you know what they say about the best laid plans, right? Sometimes the universe has its own timeline, and sometimes that timeline involves a phone call that changes everything. Sometimes your moment of revelation doesn't come when you're ready for it. It comes when you least expect it, in a way you never saw coming. Because 3 weeks ago, my phone rang. Mom's name on the caller ID, which was unusual since we maybe talk once every couple months. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that old instinct to be available when family calls. Even family that doesn't particularly seem to want you around. The conversation that followed would end up costing them about $24,000 a year and completely reshaping how I think about family, loyalty, and what it really means to be appreciated. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me tell you about that phone call. So there I was, staring at my phone with Mom's contact, lighting up the screen. I picked up on the fourth ring and immediately knew something was different. Her voice had that artificially sweet tone she uses when she wants something, but there was genuine excitement underneath it. Turns out it was about her birthday party next weekend. Now, I hadn't been invited to a family birthday in over 2 years, so this was already weird territory. But she's going on and on about how it's going to be such a special celebration, how the whole family will be there, and how she really hopes I can make it. Here's where my brain made its first mistake. I actually got excited. I'm sitting there thinking maybe this is it. Maybe they're finally ready to treat me like an actual family member instead of the black sheep who chose computers over construction work. So I did what any hopeful son would do. I immediately went online and booked a flight from Atlanta to their place. Took 3 days off work, even arranged for my assistant to handle some client calls I had scheduled. I felt like a kid again, honestly. That pathetic little spark of hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they'd actually want me there, want to hear about my life, want to celebrate together like a normal family. I should have known better, but optimism makes idiots of us all sometimes. The next day I called back to let them know I'd clear my schedule and would be flying in Friday night. Dad answered, which was already unusual because Mom handles 90% of their phone calls. His voice was different though, not the usual gruff indifference I was used to, but something harder, something that immediately put me on edge. Before I could even finish telling him about my flight details, he cut me off with something that still makes my blood pressure spike when I think about it. He told me I needed to think very carefully about whether I really want to come to this party. Apparently, Sarah had invited her new boyfriend David to meet the family. And according to Dad, this David character was someone really important, a successful investor from Wall Street who made serious money and drove the kind of car that impressed the neighbors. Dad used this exact phrase, and I'll never forget it. He said David was the kind of man who made the family look good. Then came the kicker. Dad explained that having me there, with my computer job situation, might make things awkward. He was worried that I'd somehow embarrass the family in front of this impressive new boyfriend. He actually used the word embarrass, like I was some kind of liability they had to manage. I'm sitting there listening to this, feeling like I got punched in the stomach, and Dad just keeps going. He started listing all the ways I might make the family look bad. My clothes weren't nice enough. My car was too old. I didn't have any impressive stories to tell. I worked in tech, which apparently sounds less successful than investment banking to people who don't understand either industry. The whole conversation felt surreal. Here's my father, whose mortgage I've been paying for 5 years, telling me I'm not successful enough to attend a birthday party. Here's the man whose electricity bill I cover every month, worried that I'll make his family look financially inferior to some guy Sarah's been dating for probably 3 weeks, knowing her track record. But wait, it gets worse. Dad then delivered what he probably thought was a killing blow. He told me that if I insisted on coming anyway, I shouldn't bother calling him Dad in front of David. He said it would be better for everyone if I just kept quiet about our family connection, maybe introduce myself as a family friend or something equally ridiculous. I remember exactly where I was sitting when he said that. My home office. Looking out at the backyard of the house I bought with money I earned building something from nothing. And my father was telling me I wasn't good enough to publicly claim him as family because it might make some stranger think poorly of them. Something broke in me during that conversation. Not dramatically, not with yelling or crying or any of that movie nonsense. Just this quiet, cold realization that I'd been playing a game where the rules were designed to make me lose no matter what I did. I could be secretly supporting them for decades, and it wouldn't matter because they'd already decided I was a failure of the family. So I did something I'd never done before with my parents. I got off the phone without arguing, without trying to explain, without attempting to change their minds. I just said I understood their position, and hung up. Dad seemed surprised by how calmly I took it, probably expected me to beg or get defensive like I used to. After I hung up, I sat in my office for probably 20 minutes, just staring at my computer screen. My banking app was still open from earlier when I'd been reviewing some investment portfolios for clients. And there it was, staring me right in the face, the automatic payment schedule that had been running like clockwork for 5 years. Every month, $2,000 disappearing from my account to keep their comfortable little world spinning. $2,000 a month to people who thought I was too embarrassing to be seen with in public. $2,000 a month to people who wanted me to pretend I wasn't their son because it might inconvenience their social situation. $2,000 a month to people who had never once asked how I could afford to be so generous, never once wondered if maybe their computer guy's son was doing better than they assumed. I pulled up their mortgage account first. 5 years of payments, never missed one, never even been late. Then the utilities, electric, water, gas, internet. Even their premium cable package that Dad insisted he needed for sports. Every single bill, paid in full on time, automatically debited from my business account like I was running some kind of charity for people who actively disrespected me. The total was staggering when I actually added it up. Over $50,000 in 5 years. $50,000 to people who thought I was a financial disappointment. $50,000 to people who were worried I'd make them look poor in front of some guys Sarah picked up at whatever bar she was frequenting this month. You know that moment in movies where the character has this big dramatic realization and everything changes in slow motion? This wasn't like that. This was more like waking up from a really weird dream and realizing you've been sleepwalking for 5 years straight. Just a sudden, crystal clear understanding that I'd been enabling my own mistreatment because I was too desperate for approval to see what was actually happening. So I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. I started canceling payments. Not angrily, not impulsively, just methodically working through each account and turning off the automatic transfers. Mortgage payment canceled. Electric bill canceled. Water, gas, internet, cell phones canceled. The whole process took maybe 15 minutes. 5 years of financial support, gone with a few mouse clicks and some confirmation emails. I even got little thank you messages from my bank about reducing my monthly automatic transfers, like they were congratulating me for finally coming to my senses. When I was done, I closed my laptop and went to make dinner. I wasn't angry anymore, wasn't hurt anymore, wasn't hoping for anything anymore. I was just done. Done with being treated like the family shame while secretly keeping their lives functional. Done with waiting for them to notice my success while they publicly wished I was someone else. The funny thing is, I knew exactly what was going to happen next. Their bills were due in 3 days, right around the time of Mom's big birthday celebration with the impressive Wall Street boyfriend. They were about to discover that their financial safety net had a name, and that name was a son they were too embarrassed to acknowledge. I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in years, knowing that by Sunday, everything was going to change. Saturday morning rolled around, and I woke up feeling weirdly peaceful. You know that sensation when you finally stop beating your head against a wall? Everything just feels quieter, calmer, like you can actually think clearly for the first time in forever. I made coffee, checked my emails, did some work calls with West Coast clients. Just a normal Saturday for a guy who definitely wasn't driving to his mother's birthday party. Around noon, my phone started buzzing. Text from Mom asking if I was planning to come after all, despite what Dad said. I didn't respond. Then another one 20 minutes later asking if I was okay since I hadn't answered. Still nothing from me. By evening, she'd sent 4 messages, each one getting progressively more confused about my silence. Sunday arrived like Christmas morning when you're a kid, except instead of presents under the tree, I was waiting for the power company to flip some switches. See, here's something most people don't realize about utility companies. They're surprisingly punctual about service disconnections. When payments don't process, they don't mess around with grace periods or friendly reminders, especially for accounts that have been running automatically for years. I spent most of Sunday working from home, handling some client portfolios, and trying not to obsessively check my phone. But around 3 in the afternoon, right when Mom's birthday lunch should have been hitting its stride, my phone exploded. First message came from Mom, and it was pure panic. The internet had gone down right in the middle of some video call she was trying to make with relatives. No big deal, right? Internet goes out sometimes. Except then she tried to check their account online and couldn't access it. That's when she sent me that beautiful message asking if I could please handle the internet bill like I usually do. 5 years of secret payments. And that was the first time anyone in my family had ever acknowledged that I was handling their bills. Not gratitude, not curiosity about how or why. Just this casual assumption that I'd fix their problem, because apparently I'd been fixing their problems all along without them bothering to think about it. 20 minutes later, the electricity went out. That's when Dad called. And for the first time in probably a decade, I heard actual panic in his voice. He wasn't calling to lecture me or tell me what I was doing wrong with my life. He was calling because suddenly their comfortable little world was falling apart, and they needed their disappointment son to save the day. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to the message, and it was honestly beautiful. Dad trying to explain that there must be some mistake with the electric company, that their auto pay must have glitched, that I needed to call them immediately and straighten this out. Not asking, not requesting, demanding that I fix their crisis. The water got shut off around 4:30. That's when things got really interesting, because suddenly their house full of birthday party guests couldn't use the bathrooms, couldn't wash dishes, couldn't even get ice from the refrigerator since the ice maker wasn't working without electricity. I started getting calls from numbers I didn't recognize, family members I hadn't heard from in years, all desperately trying to reach me about this utility emergency. But here's my favorite part. Nobody called to ask if I was okay. Nobody called to check on me or see how I was doing or wonder why I hadn't shown up to the party. Every single call was about getting their power back on. Even in crisis mode, even when they desperately needed my help, I was still just a tool to them. Around 5 o'clock, Mom finally called the utility companies directly to find out what was happening. That's when she made the discovery that probably should have happened years ago. Every single bill, mortgage, electric, water, gas, internet, even their cell phone plan, had been getting paid from an account belonging to one Mark Thompson. Her son, Mark. The same Mark who was supposedly too embarrassing to attend birthday parties. The callback started immediately after that. Not panicked demands anymore, but confused, guilty-sounding messages asking me to please call them back because they needed to understand what was going on. Mom left 3 voicemails in 30 minutes, each one sounding more bewildered than the last. But the real fireworks started around 6:30. I got a FaceTime call from my Aunt Elizabeth, Mom's sister, who I actually liked and who'd always been decent to me. She was calling from Mom's house, trying to help figure out the utility situation, and she wanted to talk to me directly about what was happening. I answered the call and immediately saw the chaos in the background. People standing around with their phones out using flashlights. Sarah looking absolutely mortified, and Mom frantically trying to explain to everyone why their house had suddenly become uninhabitable during her birthday celebration. Then something incredible happened. This guy walked into the frame behind Aunt Elizabeth, tall, well-dressed. Clearly the famous David who was supposed to make the family look so impressive. Elizabeth was explaining to me about the utility situation when David glanced at the phone screen and saw me. His whole face lit up with recognition. He actually smiled and waved at me through the video call, and then said the words that probably gave my entire family collective heart failure. "Hey, boss, how's it going?" "Boss." He called me boss. In front of everyone. At the party where I was supposedly too embarrassing to attend. The silence in that room was absolutely deafening. I could see Sarah's face in the background, and she looked like someone had just told her the world was ending. Dad appeared in the frame looking completely confused, and Mom just stared at the phone like it had grown legs and started dancing. David kept talking, completely oblivious to the bomb he'd just dropped. He mentioned something about looking forward to our quarterly review meeting next week, asked if I'd gotten his email about the Tesla project funding. Just casual work conversation between a boss and his employee. That's when it clicked for everyone in the room. The family embarrassment. The computer guy they didn't want around their impressive Wall Street boyfriend was actually David's direct supervisor. The son they'd been hiding was the guy who signed David's paychecks. Aunt Elizabeth, bless her heart, was the first one to put it together. She looked from the phone to David, then back to me, and asked if I was the Mark Thompson who owned the green energy investment firm that David worked for. When I confirmed it, she just started laughing. Not mean laughter, just this incredulous sound like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Sarah grabbed the phone from Elizabeth at that point, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She started asking me questions about my company, about how long I'd been David's boss, about whether this was all some kind of misunderstanding. Meanwhile, David was standing behind her looking increasingly uncomfortable as he realized he'd just exposed some serious family drama. I kept my responses simple and professional. Yes, I own the company. Yes, David worked for me. No, it wasn't a misunderstanding. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads as they tried to reconcile the successful business owner they were talking to with a family failure they'd been treating me like for years. The call ended pretty quickly after that. Sarah mumbled something about technical difficulties and hung up, but not before I saw Dad in the background starting to pace around the dark living room like he was having some kind of crisis. My phone was quiet for about an hour after that. I imagine they spent that time having some very uncomfortable conversations about their assumptions, their treatment of me, and the rather expensive consequences of underestimating the family disappointment. When the call started again around 8 p.m., the tone had completely changed. These weren't panic demands or guilty confusion anymore. These were the sounds of people who had just realized they'd made a very, very expensive mistake. Monday morning brought the kind of silence that feels dangerous. You know, like when a toddler goes quiet and you know they're probably eating crayons or drawing on the walls. Except instead of toddler, it was my entire family processing the reality bomb that had exploded at Mom's birthday party. I went about my regular Monday routine, conference calls with clients, reviewing investment portfolios, approving some funding for a wind farm project in Oklahoma. Just normal business owner stuff that apparently none of my family had bothered to notice for the past 8 years. Around 10 a.m., my assistant knocked on my office door with this weird expression on her face. She told me that David from our renewable energy division had submitted a formal request to take the rest of the week off for personal reasons. When she asked if everything was okay, he mumbled something about family drama and relationship complications. I approved the time off, obviously. Poor guy had no idea he was walking into a family dysfunction minefield when Sarah invited him to meet her parents. He probably thought he was just going to eat some birthday cake and make small talk about the weather, not accidentally expose years of financial deception and social manipulation. The first real contact came Tuesday morning. Email from Sarah with a subject line that made me actually laugh out loud. Can we talk? Urgent. 3 question marks in all caps. You know it's serious when someone breaks out the triple punctuation. The email itself was this rambling mess of panic and desperation. She wanted to know if there had been some misunderstanding about David's job, if maybe he worked for a different Mark Thompson, if perhaps this was all some cosmic coincidence that could be easily explained away. She kept using phrases like family loyalty and blood is thicker than water, which was hilarious coming from someone who'd never shown me an ounce of loyalty in 32 years. But the really good part came at the end of the email. Sarah actually had the nerve to ask me to call David and convince him to give their relationship another chance. Apparently, he'd broken up with her Sunday night after witnessing the family dynamics firsthand, and she was convinced that I could somehow fix it. I wrote back with probably the shortest email I've ever sent to a family member. Just told her that David was a professional who made his own personal decisions, and that if she wanted relationship advice, she should probably talk to someone who actually knew her well enough to care about her love life. Wednesday brought the main event. Mom and Dad showed up at my house unannounced, which was bold considering they'd spent years telling me I wasn't welcome at their events. I watched them through my security camera for a few minutes before answering the door, Dad looking uncomfortable in khakis that were probably older than my car, Mom clutching her purse like she was about to enter a war zone. They clearly rehearsed some kind of speech, because they both started talking at once about misunderstandings and family bonds and how they'd always been proud of my success. It was like listening to politicians try to walk back a controversial statement, all careful words and strategic emotion. The conversation that followed was fascinating from a psychological perspective. They wanted to simultaneously apologize for underestimating me and ask for my financial help, but they couldn't quite figure out how to do both without looking completely ridiculous. Dad kept talking about family obligations and how successful people have a responsibility to help their relatives. Mom focused on how they'd always supported my dreams, conveniently forgetting every conversation where she'd asked when I was getting a real job. Neither of them could bring themselves to actually acknowledge the 5 years of secret payments or explain why they'd never wondered where their financial security was coming from. The really infuriating part was how they framed their request for help. They didn't ask me to resume the payments. That would have required admitting they knew about them in the first place. Instead, they asked if I could help them through this temporary financial difficulty, like their mortgage and utilities had just become problems overnight. They had this whole story worked out about unexpected expenses and economic uncertainty, completely ignoring the fact that their financial crisis had started exactly when I stopped subsidizing their lifestyle. It was like watching someone explain why they suddenly couldn't breathe after you've been secretly providing them with oxygen for 5 years. When they finally got to the actual numbers, I almost felt bad for them. They needed about $2,000 a month to cover their basic expenses, which was exactly what I've been paying automatically for half a decade. They presented this like it was a temporary loan situation, maybe 6 months until they could get back on their feet. I listened to the whole pitch without interrupting, watching them perform this elaborate dance around the truth. When they finished, I asked one simple question. How much was Sarah contributing to this family financial emergency? The silence was beautiful. Dad started explaining about Sarah's emotional state after a breakup, how she was dealing with a lot of stress and probably couldn't handle financial pressure right now. Mom added that Sarah had always been more sensitive, that money matters were too complicated for her to understand. So let me get this straight. I told them they wanted me to financially support 2 adults who were capable of working, but had decided that one of them was too delicate to contribute to her own housing costs. They wanted me to pay for their lifestyle, while Sarah focused on her emotional recovery from dating my employee for 3 weeks. That's when I made them an offer they definitely weren't expecting. I told them I'd be happy to help with their mortgage situation, but it would need to be a proper business arrangement. Either they could sign the house over to me and I'd let them live there while paying a reasonable monthly rent, or Sarah could cover half the mortgage and I'd cover the other half. The explosion was immediate and predictable. Suddenly, I was greedy, manipulative, taking advantage of their desperation. Dad accused me of holding money over their heads. Mom started crying about how families shouldn't treat each other like business partners. Neither of them seemed to grasp the irony of complaining about being treated like business partners while asking for a business-sized loan. I walked them to the door after that, politely but firmly told them they had my offer and they could think about it. But those were the only terms I was willing to consider. They left muttering about ungrateful children and family loyalty, apparently unaware that they had just proven exactly why I'd stopped helping them in the first place. As I watched them drive away, I realized something important. This wasn't really about money. And it never had been. This was about respect, recognition, and what it means to be valued by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. They still had no idea who I really was. 2 years. That's how long it's been since Mom's birthday party disaster. And honestly, it feels like a lifetime. I'm sitting here in my home office. Same chair where I made those fateful clicks to cancel their automatic payments. And I keep thinking about how different everything feels now. The immediate aftermath was pretty much what you'd expect. Radio silence for about 3 weeks. Then a series of increasingly desperate calls that I didn't answer. They tried different approaches, guilt trips, anger, even attempted manipulation through other family members who started reaching out asking why I was being so difficult. Aunt Elizabeth called me about a month after everything went down. She was the only one who seemed to actually get it, probably because she'd witnessed the whole birthday party meltdown firsthand. She told me that Mom and Dad had been asking everyone in the extended family for money, spinning this story about unexpected financial hardship and ungrateful children. Most of the family wasn't buying it, though. See, here's the thing about small family circles. People talk, and word had gotten out about exactly what happened at that birthday party. Everyone knew about David calling me boss. Everyone knew about the utility shutoffs. And most importantly, everyone had figured out that I'd been secretly supporting my parents for years while they treated me like garbage. The family dynamics shifted in ways I never expected. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years started reaching out, not for money or favors, but just to reconnect. Turns out, a lot of them had always thought my parents were too hard on me, but nobody wanted to get involved in family drama. Once the truth came out, though, several relatives admitted they'd always suspected I was more successful than Mom, and Dad let on. Sarah's situation got particularly interesting. After David broke up with her, she went through this whole victim phase, telling anyone who'd listen about how her brother had sabotaged her relationship out of jealousy. Problem was, David worked in my industry, and our professional community isn't that big. Word got around pretty quickly about what really happened. About 6 months in, I got an unexpected call from David himself. He'd been promoted to senior analyst, and wanted to thank me for not letting the family drama affect his career. We actually became pretty good friends after that. He's got a great sense of humor about the whole situation, and he loves telling the story at industry events about the time he accidentally exposed his boss's secret double life. Turns out David had figured out something was off with Sarah's family pretty early in their relationship. He said the way they talked about money and success never quite matched their lifestyle, and he'd been getting weird vibes about their attitude toward me specifically. The birthday party incident just confirmed what he'd already suspected about their character. Around the 1-year mark, Mom tried a different approach. She started sending me cards for holidays and birthdays with these long handwritten notes about how much she loved me and how proud she was of my success. No mention of money. No request for help. Just a sudden flood of maternal affection that felt about 5 years too late. The cards kept coming for months. Valentine's Day, Easter, 4th of July, my birthday, even random Hallmark holidays like National Son's Day. Each one filled with a syrupy sweet sentiment about what a wonderful son I was and how much I meant to the family. It was like she'd suddenly discovered I existed as a person instead of just a potential ATM. Dad's approach was different. He started leaving voicemails about random stuff, sports scores, weather updates, things he'd seen on the news that reminded him of me. Never anything important, never any requests, just these awkward attempts to maintain some kind of connection without having to address the elephant in the room. I listened to every voicemail, but never called back. It wasn't cruelty. Exactly, more like emotional self-preservation. I'd spent 32 years hoping my father would want to talk to me like I mattered, and now that he was trying, it felt hollow somehow. Like he was only reaching out because he'd learned I had money, not because he'd actually changed his opinion of me as a person. The real test came about 18 months after the birthday incident. I heard through the family grapevine that they were facing foreclosure. The house that had been their pride and joy, the symbol of their suburban success, was about to be taken by the bank because they couldn't afford the payments without my secret subsidy. Part of me felt bad about it. I'll be honest. These were still my parents, still the people who'd raised me and fed me and taught me to ride a bike. But then I remembered Dad telling me not to call him father in front of David, and the sympathy faded pretty quickly. They never asked me directly for help with the foreclosure. Instead, they sold the house and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. Mom sent me their new address on a postcard with a picture of sunset and some quote about new beginnings. No explanation, no request for sympathy, just this matter-of-fact notification that their circumstances had changed. I drove by their old house once, maybe 6 months ago. New family living there now. Young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever. They'd painted the front door blue and planted flower beds, where Mom used to have her perfectly manicured lawn. It looked happy, lived in, like a home where people actually appreciate what they had. These days, our family relationship exists in this weird middle ground. We're not estranged, exactly, but we're not close either. I get updates through other relatives. They probably hear about my life through the same network. Occasionally, we'll end up at the same family event. Weddings, funerals, that kind of thing, and we're polite to each other. The difference is, now when Dad talks to me at these events, there's this underlying respect that was never there before. He asks about my business, listens when I answer, doesn't interrupt to explain how real men should work. Mom brags about my success to other relatives, which would have meant everything to me 5 years ago, but now just feels performative. Sarah and I have probably had 3 conversations in 2 years, all of them superficial small talk at family gatherings. She's dating someone new now, a guy who works in insurance and drives a Honda Civic and seems completely unimpressed by her family drama stories. They seem happy together, which is good for her, I guess. The funny thing is, I don't miss them. I thought there would be this big empty space where family used to be. But what I've discovered is that there wasn't much family there to begin with, just this transactional relationship where I kept hoping for love and acceptance while they kept taking whatever I was willing to give. I've got real relationships now, friends who actually know what I do for a living, colleagues who respect my work, a girlfriend who thinks it's awesome that I built my own company, people who like me because of who I am, not despite it, people who would never ask me to hide my success, to make someone else more comfortable. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting off the financial support, if I feel bad about what happened to my parents' house. The honest answer is no, not anymore. I learned something important from that whole experience. Family isn't about blood or obligation or guilt. It's about people who see your worth and celebrate your success and want you around because you make their lives better. My parents had 5 years to notice that their bills were being paid by someone who cared about them. 5 years to wonder, to ask questions, to show gratitude or curiosity or basic human decency. They chose not to. That's not my failure, it's theirs. So here I am, 2 years later, still successful, still building my company, still living my life on my own terms. I'm not angry anymore, not hurt anymore, not hoping for things that will never come. I'm just free, and that feels pretty good. Thanks for listening to this crazy family story of mine. I know it's a lot to process, and honestly, I'm still processing it myself sometimes. What do you think? Did I handle this the right way, or should I have done something different? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I actually read all of them and appreciate hearing different perspectives on this situation. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more content like this, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow, and I've got some other wild family stories I might share if people are interested. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.